Hi everybody, welcome back to Paleo Cooking Live. I'm Tina Wells and welcome to my kitchen. Today I'm going to show you some fun autumn paleo baking recipes. Now the thing I like about baking, of course, is I've been a pastry chef for a really long time, so it's kind of in my blood. But the thing that I enjoy about paleo baking, which is kind of an oxymoron because I don't think cavemen really baked, but that's another subject. I like to use grain-free flours. So you'll see some coconut flour, some cassava flour, and other things like that that come from vegetables that are ground up instead of wheat or other grains. And they're much easier to digest. And also some low sugar options like maple syrup and coconut sugar as opposed to table sugar. And the thing I like about these other sugar options is they have a low glycemic load, which is how quickly sugar enters your blood system. So anyway, we're gonna go into a little bit of that without getting too sciencey. But the first thing that I want to show you today is this really fun apple galette. Now I've been making apple galettes for a really long time. It was a recipe that I made back when I was baking professionally. My former boss, employer, had it on his regular menu and we really perfected this recipe. But this dough is gonna be totally grain-free, and the apples, instead of being sauteed in a pile of brown sugar like we used to do and cinnamon and spices, it's just gonna be a little maple syrup because the apples are sweet enough on their own. So let's get started. First thing I'm gonna do is use my food processor to make the dough. And I'll grab all those ingredients for you. So those go into the food processor. You can see it's a little lumpy, but that's okay because it's all gonna grind down really quickly. And then what I'd like to do is add some ghee. Ghee is clarified butter. It's the only dairy that I eat because it comes from butter, obviously, which is derived from milk, but it's all of the fat solids are removed. So we're gonna do 2 tablespoons of the ghee. And I'm just gonna measure those and scoop them in. So I'm just gonna put the lid on and process that for a second. I'm just gonna pulse it. It's gonna look very similar to any other pastry dough that we make. I'm gonna add 1 egg. And process that again. And you'll see it's gonna come together really quickly like a ball. And the last thing I wanna do, I'm gonna get my water running because I just need a little bit of cold water. And look how that's starting to come together already. Now when I turn it on, there it goes, right in the top while it's running. Sometimes it needs to, but I'd rather add it one at a time. There it goes. And that's it. It's done. Doing that, I'm going to turn my burner on because I want to get this pan a little warm so we can saute the apples. So here's our dough. Feels really good. It feels just like any other dough that you would make with real flour. And it tastes delicious. It's light, again, low glycemic load. I'm just using my little hand spatula. Used to have drawers full of these to get the rest of the crumbs out. And you can see it packs together very nicely. Now it's not gonna be as stretchy as a dough that has gluten because the gluten is obviously gonna have that more elastic property. Just gonna knead it together a little bit. And that's it. Now I'll wrap this in plastic wrap and I'll put it in the refrigerator. And I already have one ready for you. so I can pull that out of the fridge and show you how to roll it out and how we make these fun galettes. This is the cassava flour. I buy this on Thrive Market. Thrive Market is my go-to these days for non-GMO, unprocessed organic foods. Dry ingredients like this are great from there. If you do an annual membership, it's $49 a year, and then everything that you spend over $49 is free shipping. So it really is, you know, just a great deal and a great way to kind of capitalize on these sorts of ingredients. For example, my husband went to the local grocery store last night to pick up some more almond flour for me, and it was almost double what I pay at Thrive Market. So there you go. So the next thing I want to do for you is, again, going to involve a little bit of ghee. I have some ghee right here. I'm going to do about a tablespoon into my preheated pan, and you can see that sizzling right away. So what I have here are some already diced up Honeycrisp apples. You can use Granny Smith, you can use any type of apple you prefer. The thing I like about the Honeycrisp is they hold up really well when you bake them, and they're already sweeter than the Granny Smith, which is personal preference, but I'm gonna add less sugar to make up for the difference because these already have the sweetness. I'm just gonna add those in, and I love that sizzle. Get those going right away. Why am I sauteing the apples and not just baking them in the oven? Well, I like the way it seals the juices into each piece of apple, gives it a nice brown crispiness on the outside, and just adds to the overall texture. Sorry, I keep stepping off camera. So those are gonna set up a little bit, and I'm just gonna drizzle them with a tiny bit of maple syrup, maybe a tablespoon. I like to pour it right out of here because I'm a little lazy. There we go. And I'll stir those around. I'm gonna turn the heat up because I want it to be really hot. I don't want these to boil. I want them to saute. And while those are going, I have my trusty rolling pin. I'm gonna grab the other dough out of the fridge and show you how to roll these out. So I have a little bit of dough here. It looks like it's not much, but it will be just right. And I'll show you how to put two of these together. I have 2 apples sauteed. I usually will typically do 1 apple per galette. And this dough recipe should make at least 4 galettes, depending on how big you wanna make them, how big your apples are. These are getting really nice. We don't want them to be super soft. We just want them to lose a little bit of that really crispy, but we still want to maintain some nice texture. So I'm just going to cut this dough in half. And again, to roll this out, I'm just going to use my cassava flour. Sprinkle a little bit on the cutting board. And do you love my countertops? The whole thing is a cutting board. It's the best way to get maximum space. So I'm just shaping this a little bit so it's round. And you can see this rolls out really nicely, just like any other dough. Keep the flour on the counter to make a little bit of a barrier between the dough and the counter so it doesn't stick, but not so much that it gets really gummy. And that's about all the bigger we need it to be. And you can see it. Here we go. So what I'll do is pick it up and put it right onto the sheet pan that I'm going to bake it on. And I have a sheet pan right here with some parchment paper. Put that right on there. And it's okay if it's a little, you know, sort of misshapen. It's a free form. We like it to look a little rustic. So I'm doing the same thing with this one, just shaping the dough into a round, and it's about, not quite a ½ inch thick. A little more flour. And I like to flip it over so I have a little flour on both sides, and then just back and forth one direction, back and forth the other direction, flip it over at the same time if you like. Oh, and guess what? Sometimes they crack. So you just push it back together, right? Nobody ever knows the difference once it's baked. And if it falls apart a little, just pinch it. These things are gonna happen in your kitchen and you need to know what to do. Now it's a little thinner on this side than it is the rest of the way, so I'm just gonna kind of roll it out. Make sure that it feels even all the way around. Because once we put the apples in, we're gonna kind of fold the crust around the mound of apples, and we don't want the crust to be super thick to begin with, and then it doesn't bake well because there's areas where it overlapped and it's too thick. So that's not exactly round, but see, that's okay. Dust off my hands, and we're gonna give these apples another stir. These are getting nice and brown on the bottom. That maple syrup is starting to caramelize, giving them a lovely golden color, just like anything else you saute. You want it to have that nice sealed in flavor. Since these are almost ready, I'm gonna go ahead and add our spice mix. Now, lots of recipes for autumn call for pumpkin pie spice, and that's fine if you don't feel like making your own, but I have always made my own pumpkin spice blend. It's simply cinnamon, nutmeg, clove, and ground ginger. I do 2 parts of cinnamon to 1 part of everything else. So if I did 2 tablespoons of cinnamon, then it would be 1 tablespoon of each of the others. And that's all there is to it. And you can mix it up in a jar. I always have giant quantities of these spices individually anyway, so I wouldn't go buy another one. I'm just gonna make my own. I'm just gonna sprinkle a little bit into the lid. It's gonna be about a teaspoon. And dust these apple pieces with that. And that just smells amazing already. I'm going to stir that together. This is such a beautiful fall dessert, and I love to make these. I was so sad when I wasn't using my traditional recipe anymore, but guess what? I figured out how to make it better. And when you think about the nutrients that are packed into this and being able to clean it up a little bit and cook with healthier sugar options, you don't even feel bad about eating it. Now they're just starting to dry off. The bottom isn't wet anymore, so that means a lot of the apple juices have gone away. And we're done. They're gonna be really hot to handle. So I'm gonna scoop them back into this little bowl to let them cool for a second. And while that's happening, I'm gonna show you how to make a pumpkin pecan snickerdoodle. I'll be right back. And here's the ingredients for our cookie. And this is honestly just so easy to put together. Unless you're making a really big batch, you don't even really need to do it in a mixer. I like to do it in a mixer sometimes, but it's certainly not necessary. So what's going into this? We're gonna have almond flour and coconut flour. So I already have the almond flour and the coconut flour in this bowl. To this, I'm going to add a little bit of baking soda, some cream of tartar, and some salt. So it's a 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda, a 1/2 teaspoon of cream of tartar. The reason I'm using cream of tartar and baking soda is because I'm substituting for baking powder by using those as a combination. Baking powder contains cornstarch. I don't eat grains, so I'm leaving out the cornstarch. And cream of tartar actually gives it a much nicer crispy consistency if you're going for a crispy cookie, which with snickerdoodles we are. So I'm just gonna, it's already measured out in here. I'm just gonna add that to the bowl. And there's also some salt in there. And then we're just gonna mix that up. I'm going to use my whisk. Actually, let me get the big whisk because then we're going to switch. If you whisk it, it will help to remove any of those lumps that are just naturally occurring in the almond flour. It does have a little moisture in it because they don't use anything to desiccate or dry out the almonds when they grind them. That's why they're still organic. We don't want any added chemicals. So that looks pretty good. I'll set that aside, and the next thing we're gonna do is mix up the wet part of the ingredients. So I have a little bit of coconut oil, about 3 tablespoons that I'm gonna add to this bowl. And it's at room temperature. Here in Florida, room temperature is still pretty warm. But if you needed to melt it in the microwave a little bit to get it soft, then go ahead and do that. I'm just gonna kind of smash it down a little bit. And to that, I'm gonna add 3 tablespoons of pumpkin puree. Again, I'm getting this at Thrive Market. For some reason, there was some huge run. I know, don't laugh at me, I'm using my knife to open the can. There was some huge run on pumpkin puree and we couldn't find it in the stores anywhere. So I ordered it on Thrive Market and they had it for me. So that made me happy. I'm gonna do 3 tablespoons. That's like 1 1/2. Okay, and we'll mash those together so it's a nice smooth consistency. And you can see that all of the coconut oil is mixing in very well, very smooth and very nicely. You don't want anyone to get a bite of. It's just like creaming butter when you're cooking or baking with butter. You want to cream the butter and get it nice and smooth and emulsified so the other ingredients will blend in nice and smoothly. And I'm just doing this with the spatula because it's so simple. Next, I'm going to add, oh, I do have my coconut flour here. Okay, so there's the coconut flour going in with the dry. That's what happens for prepping in advance. So now I'm going to add a 1/4 cup of maple syrup. And that's the only sweetener we need. Stir that in. The other thing that I like to point out is you can see I'm starting with the harder or denser ingredients and adding the liquids or lighter, more viscous ingredients as I go. And the reason for that is if you started with the maple syrup or water or something very, very viscous and then tried to add something thicker to it, you're gonna end up with lumps. It's never gonna smooth out. But if you start with the thicker ingredients and slowly add the thinner in, go from thickest to thinnest, I guess is probably the easiest way to describe it, it makes it much easier to blend together and yields a much more consistent recipe. Okay, so now I have 1 egg. I think I need to grab an egg. Here it is. So we're adding 1 egg. And I'll just blend that in. Again, the egg being so, loose and viscous, I might even just switch to my whisk to blend it in a little more easily. And that's coming together just fine. Now we're gonna add a little vanilla. I have about a 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla. And last but not least, a teaspoon of our dry pumpkin spice blend. And we'll just add that to the dry to keep it easy to mix. So I'll stir the vanilla in. And then I'll add, I'm just gonna stir those together like that. So we get that spice mix blended in. Now I'm just gonna fold the wet part into the dry. I always go wet to dry. I never go dry to wet, hardly ever. Standard mixing method. And stir those together. It's gonna make a very nice cookie dough. And I have my oven preheated to 350. So we've got a little pumpkin, we've got the pumpkin spice blend, the coconut flour, the almond flour. These yield a nice crispy on the outside, chewy on the inside bite of cookie. Now you could chill this at this point if you wanted to chill it, or you can just proceed. For the sake of time, I'm gonna show you what's next, because I have a couple other fun things that I wanna show you for techniques. I have a sheet pan here prepared with my parchment paper. Get some of these things out of the way, and I'll show you how fun this is to do. In a sheet pan, I'm going to put some coconut sugar. Now most cookies, snickerdoodles, are going to have a sugar spice blend on the outside. This is just organic coconut palm sugar. I buy it in a bag like this. It looks like brown sugar, but it's not processed like brown sugar is. And to that, I'm gonna add a little more of my pumpkin spice blend. So rather than just being cinnamon sugar, we're gonna have those flavors in two places. I'm just gonna mix those together. And this is what I love about doing it on the sheet pan. You spread it out a little bit like that. And then I'm just gonna scoop with my portion scoop. This is a 1 ounce portion scoop. The cookie dough, nice and flat. And this yields a nice consistent size cookie. They're always gonna be the same size when you do something like this. And these scoops are not expensive. They're a great investment. And you'll use them in your kitchen for everything. So you scoop a few and then you roll the pan around a little bit. Roll the dough in it. And now you have a nice coated cookie dough ball. And I'm going to space them out. And you just repeat this procedure until you go through. Again, you could probably use regular sugar if that's what you have, but I really encourage you to try these ingredients. You can serve your family some healthier, more nutrient-dense, even sweet treats and not feel bad about it, and they won't know the difference. When I was developing this recipe, I took one into my husband to try, and he said, "That's a good cookie. I'd never know the difference." So there's about 9 of those. Now here's the fun part. I'm gonna take these cookies, and I'm gonna take a half a pecan, I'm gonna put it right in the center and push. That not only spreads out the cookie, but it adds another dimension to these cookies. It gives them a nice little crunchy top. The pecans toast beautifully in the oven while they're baking. You get that lovely crust from the coconut sugar and the spices. Who wouldn't want to serve this on Thanksgiving or during the holidays? And it's grain-free, no gluten, no upset stomachs. We've got enough other things that can create those terrible side effects. So I'm gonna put these in the oven for 8 to 10 minutes. I'll start with 8 and I'll add a little extra time if I feel like we need it. I'll be right back. So now that we've given those apples a little bit of time to cool off, I'm gonna come back to them. Apples are still a little warm. Again, you could chill all of this and then continue on, but I like to have the dough a little more pliable, so I wouldn't necessarily put this back in the refrigerator before I try to wrap these. So I'm just gonna split this, and I'm also sort of making sure that the juices that settled into the bottom of the bowl don't go into the crust, and they are still warm. And I like to pile them up. We don't want So I'm mounding them up. The other thing you can do is make these apples in advance, chill them the day before, and then maybe put them over a strainer to drain off any excess juice. And that keeps the crust from getting soggy in the bottom. Now I'm just gonna fold these, starting around one side and going around. And if it cracks a little bit, it's okay. We're gonna go back and fix that. So we're making a fun little free-form tart. Now I see a little opening right there. I'm just gonna pinch those back together. And that's it. Now we'll do this side. These will go back in the refrigerator and chill. You can even take them this far and freeze them and bake them from frozen. So if you're doing a little holiday prep and you want to have a fun dessert that's a little twist on apple pie, you can prep these in advance and freeze them, take them right out of the freezer and go straight into the oven. You will have to increase the bake time a little bit, just keep an eye on the crust. And that's it. It's on the parchment paper. We don't have to pick them up and move them. I'm gonna put these in the refrigerator so that they can chill, and then I'll show you what they look like finished. Be right back. Okay, the last thing I wanna show you today before we go back to the things in the oven is not my recipe. I give total and complete credit to Nom Nom Paleo. Let me get the ingredients and show you this really fun, instant, microwavable dessert. Nom Nom Paleo has been such an inspiration for me ever since I became paleo, and her recipes are amazing. And she was a food scientist. She was a food scientist, worked in the industry that she now calls Frankenfoods, because everything was how to develop processed foods, and she got completely away from it, and now she does amazing paleo foods. I'm gonna need some avocado oil. So I'll grab that. You can use any oil you want. You can melt some coconut oil. You could use MCT oil. I'm gonna use avocado oil just to show you something a little different. So the first thing I have in this measuring cup is 3 tablespoons of almond flour. I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of maple syrup. And I'm gonna make this little guy right here in this ramekin. I'm gonna go in, tablespoon of avocado oil, a little baking soda, just a tiny bit. It calls for 1/8 of a teaspoon, and I have a 1/4 teaspoon here, so I'm just gonna do about half. Like that. And the same thing, 1/4 teaspoon salt. So just about a half of that 1/4 teaspoon. Because these are individual, so you don't really need to load it up with a lot of extra. And then of course, our pumpkin spice blend. I'm gonna do a 1/2 teaspoon of that, because we really want this to have a lot of flavor. And of course, pumpkin. So I'm gonna do another tablespoon of this pumpkin. And just whisk it all up together. And then we're gonna add 1 egg. And I like to do this in a measuring cup because it's big, has nice capacity. I can whip it without it splashing all over the place. And it comes together nice and smooth, almost like a batter. And this is gonna be very similar to a souffle. So I'm gonna take that ramekin. You don't have to grease it or anything. And just pour this right into the ramekin. It's gonna fill it up about halfway. You can use a coffee cup, whatever you have handy. I actually do a chocolate version of this for birthdays, and they're very fun. I'm gonna put this in the microwave for 1.5 minutes. I'll be right back. So now I want to show you how these galettes look when they're finished. They're a nice little petite dessert. They're nice and crispy. The bottoms are nice and solid, so they didn't get soggy. And you could even brush these with a little honey if you wanted the crust to get nice and glossy. It's not required, but would make it even a little extra special. And you can serve these with a little coconut cream on top. Again, totally dairy-free. What I did was I just whipped a little bit of coconut cream right out of the can. It's the full fat coconut cream. Looks just like this. Coconut cream, I get it at Whole Foods. You can buy it in any market. It's organic, unsweetened coconut cream. And I whipped it, and it whips up just like whipped cream in the mixer. And I added a little maple syrup, just so it could have a little sweetness. Of course, it's sweet on its own. And I can just put that right on top like that. Now, who wouldn't want to eat this amazing dessert that's totally grain-free and low sugar? I'm gonna grab those cookies out of the oven. These came out perfectly. They're nice and crispy on the outside with that pecan in the middle. You can see that they had some nice lift and they got a beautiful size. Let's put some of these on this plate over here. Have my fun little fall plate here to show you for some of these fresh cookies. And that pecan gives it a lovely crunch. The sugar on the outside tastes delicious. And you can do this. You can bake healthy bakes. Oh, and now my other dessert is finished. Let me grab that from the microwave. You're not going to believe this one. Look how it puffs up, just like a souffle. And we can add a little of the coconut cream to this. When I used to do souffles in the restaurant, I would poke a hole in the middle and put the cream down into the center or pour chocolate sauce. I know. We can still do chocolate sauce. And I'm just gonna take a little bit of this pumpkin spice blend and sprinkle it over the top. So here we have a beautiful, instant, microwavable dessert. Thank you to Nom Nom Paleo for the inspiration. She's awesome. Go to her website and check out all of her paleo things. Look at the cake. That's a gorgeous slice of cake with a little bit of that cream on it. And we have our delicious pumpkin snickerdoodles and our apple galette. I hope you enjoyed everything I'm baking today. I'll have some Halloween recipes coming up in the next couple weeks, and then we're gonna get into Thanksgiving prep so you can serve your families some delicious and nutritious Thanksgiving meals and side dishes. Look for me on Instagram, Facebook, my website. Everything is livingdelishandnutrish.com. I hope to see you there. Thanks for joining me this week, and I'll see you soon. Have a great day.